Yes, so like trend right now, I'm for like even while being sure of like basically taking this decision to like stay at Will's home and wait for help. Like that would definitely due to that offer right now. So we will be totally blank and will be totally blank as for like what to do next, like how to like solve this like for extreme situation, especially because like operating shop with like not the loss of like profit, like I'm even way more than like operating shop like witnessing how extremely dangerous and scary these spaces monsters are. Definitely not it will be like the way Bob died. That might have simply shock and scare horror. Even more than the shock of like losing Bob. It's definitely not great, but so definitely glad seeing how like especially like points had already I think that he had already shown Hopper, definitely Hopper that they would be the true extent of like how much like the cake how extended I think to like the far deep into the underground the like the Nazi lava and since like I think like it so like Hopper alone that had basically seen that like Owen had shown Hopper alone and compared to like Mike and like the others like basically like the person that's like Hopper alone I think like that knows that basically of like the great number of like honeycomb like underground upside down that like person beneath like the energy laboratory for like since that Hopper alone might be like known of the like information like Hopper like would be like then more far more even while Hopper being a sort of like Hopper would be like seeing like the current situation of like even far more of like an extremely uncontrollable and kind of like a situation where like Hopper is right now totally blank and don't be knowing what to do at all right now. It was like without like Owen's definitely membership and definitely that won't be the case for like Mike and like the especially with like Mike right now getting angry with like how positive is going to like stay at like this moment to like wait for help. Like I'm doing that would definitely lead to like I'm doing definitely Mike not having any idea as for like Mike definitely why we do like Mike not having seen like the full extent of like how much like the gate within like the other thing has gone and like as for like how many of like the great number of like underground honeycomb like mazes are often beneath like the of the laboratory. The only information that might to be knowing would be that like about like seeing like these multiple like dark like monsters within like the laboratory like that will be like only extent of like the information might would be knowing and this would be the reason for like my right now getting entry just like copper remember so like definitely I'm still thinking about the realization that like Owens definitely will be providing it's definitely remember so like and definitely Owens it will be Owens himself along with like himself will be like leading the way ahead for like Hopper and all of them to like in their fight to like against like the spreading of the bad word, especially when the brain. So definitely as for like how Owen could be surviving definitely bringing like for to be two possibilities like one possibility definitely my prediction that I'm putting on to that basically like there might be an emergency like a different kind of like a thing present within like the laboratory, but like to turn that on where like I'm looking at once like the button for that emergency attack within like the defensive attack within like the energy laboratory. Once like that button is turned on and the ports for that button to work like I'm looking like the power should be on to that first thing that I'm looking and like once that button is on like I'm looking like it might be a situation where like poison of gases will be like spreading for like the energy laboratory and I'm looking maybe from that exact would be from that exact control room where like going to last scene at like the like all the utilities and everything like it will be from there that like Owen would be able to like even section out and decide like where exactly to like to spread like the poison gas within like another level and all that. So like I'm looking like it was such a manner like Owen like using that emergency defense situation while locking himself in like the control room and putting on definitely everything there will be like gas mask as well. Uh, within like that control room. So like putting on the gas mask and basically like pushing the button and like turning off that poison of gas within within like the energy level and that way like eliminating all the phase monsters that would be at that point present within like the energy level phase like one person scenario that so and so according to my perception that ends up being like the manner through which like Owen manages to like survive like in the situation like I'm different than like the reason for Owens not using such a strategy earlier will be definitely due to like I'm still remember the question would be due to like the power actually being needed for like such an emergency that poisonous gas attacked against like some of the phenomena. So like similar for like the power being turned on like currently like Bob having to like basically like reset like the breakup and everything. So it's definitely another frame which is and even after doing that, like I'm still like the exit door might be uh, even from where Bob was, like from there, like the exit door, the situation might have been like the exit door might be like closer to Bob uh, when compared to that control. So like this as well might be the reason for like and that for like deciding maybe not to use the strategy and instead like trying to like guide and lead Owen to like take the top so that like at that point like after like getting everyone out towards like the exit or like Owens would be able to like send out that person's gas strategy and other thing there might have not been like air mask and gas mask either. It's also like about that about the within like the control room. It's also like within like the industry not be about it or like there might not be like spare gas and gas mask. It's also like so like this as well might be the reason for like Owens like totally like telling all of and all of them to like basically to like making all of them like basically make their way towards like the exit gate without using such a person here try to uh, might be the case. It's also like might have been mentioned. So like this like one possibility as for like thousand of different like one should be that survive uh the situation which like might have been mentioned. The second possibility that I'm looking for like right now with like Bob that like I'm looking at own the other programming with the things like for like own being like absolutely shocked at like basically that the fact and like realization through like the CCTV that Owens might have only seen how Bob had the private chat of that Bob in the store. But at that point, still like I'm Owens might have sort of scared and Owens might have quickly locked probably locked like the door to like the control room at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like maybe that the other possible scenario that I'm doing for like the face of monsters at that point, like basically Biden slowly catching up to and reaching like the control room and basically the face of monsters like the multiple faceless monsters like all of them like so they attacking like the door of like the control room and trying to like infiltrate into the control room. So like at that point like Owen is being in a situation Owen to be extremely scared because like Owen is being in a situation where like Owen won't be able to like escape from like the control room. There will be like only that single door out of the control room and that door will be like the door that like the face monster at that point will be trying to like destroy and infiltrate into the control room. That one should be is like the scenario. Other possible scenario that I'm going to like humble thing like the that way Owen being suddenly there and like the Facebook also like breaking in, finally breaking in into the control room and basically walking towards like Owen and extremely scared Owens and basically right as like the Facebook monster would be about to take Owen's life at that very last second. Until like like the Facebook monsters like all of them getting taken out at that point itself, which is like the scenario that I'm doing. And Owens would be like totally shocked. And basically at that point, Owens probably seeing that 11 like basically right there. And that like 11 using 11 like superpowers, like taking out all those Facebook monsters. It's like the other possible scenario that I'm working all the time. And my reference was that like through if it in fact ends up being through such a scenario that like basically Owen survives like the person situation through like the help of like 11 of all people that I'm working that ends up being the case that my other impressions were like 11 what might have happened with like 11 would be like since like the last time 11 had basically tried to like search for like pop up through like the last word like 11 had seen Mike as well as like pop up in like the energy laboratory. So like I'm doing like after that like 11 might have not used like the after that like 11 his mind might have been filled with the thoughts of like as quickly as possibly as quickly as possible to be able to like get to like the energy laboratory. So like I'm doing like 11 might have not like tried to like search for like Mike and Hopper after that go like the last word again might have been what might have happened. So like I'm in that way that 11 just like quickly making it to like Hawkins and then straight away like heading without searching for like neither Mike nor Hopper again through the last word like 11 might have straight away rush to like the rush and ran towards like the energy laboratory and might have entered into like the energy laboratory and might have searched around within like the energy laboratory and at that point might have been when like everyone might have heard the sound of like the face of Morpheus at a distance. So like at that point, like 11 might have with that app, would definitely able to bring, especially with like Cali's training and everything like right now, and with like the branding of Hopper and everything like I'm going like this like a whole year of when like totally probably like I'm doing 11 right now. Electro would be a whole lot bolder and like stronger and courageous than grinding. So like I'm looking like 11 with that absolute confidence like totally marching towards like the area where like 11 will be hearing like the sound of the basic models, and they are like I'm looking like those 11 the situation will be like 11 seeing like a bunch of like basic models like breaking down like the straw, which would be like drop to like the control from the points of the environment. So like I'm looking at that point like 11 slowly without even seeing owns like I'm looking 11 like attack and taking out like the basic models using it on superpowers and like it would be without even 11 even realizing that uh, it's like going from like the other side, especially in the 300. So that way, like it will be after like 11, we'll be taking out the his muscles using like 11, the superpower that they be 11, that to his scenario. Like it will be only after taking out like the his muscles that 11 will be even see like on the human range. Yeah, like the claim missions that like once might be like someone who will be like totally new to that the energy laboratory and might have showed up to that the energy laboratory only after that Pranav might have left to like the battle world. Like it will be only at that point that like once might have even showed up to like Pranav's energy laboratory and picked up as the doctor there. It's definitely might have preemption. So definitely like and definitely even in like 11th like those memories of like careers and everything in like 11th memories like definitely even after like seeing like the days of like like I'm doing like 11 won't be able to like connect on owns to like anyone that 11 might have seen in like 11th like traumatic past or even in like the memories of like career in careers suffering uh, in like the memories of careers were like careers suffered in like recent past in like the lab as well. Like basically 11 won't be able to like connect points to like neither one of those memories is definitely memory. So like that way like 11 straight away asking like point like as to like where like Mike would get on the line like where's Mike or like where's Mike and Hopper would get on the line like 11 would be asking at that point towards like on to like the scenario that you so like that way like I'm looking like at that point itself like I'm looking like the all the monsters in like the lab at that time like getting taken out by 11 it's like the scenario that I'm looking like so at that point Owen straight away falling Hopper it's like the scenario that I'm looking so like I'm looking like while Hopper especially after like Hopper hadn't seen extremely how extremely dangerous that these face monsters are especially with like seeing how Bob had died, like I'm thinking like Hopper would be like not keeping much hope. Like even though Hopper is like desperately and frantically like calling and searching for like owns and everything, which would definitely lead you to that extreme fear that Hopper might be having because of after like seeing like how owns had died, like the possibility of like the possibility of how like Bob had died, like the possibility of like owns surviving like would be something that like Hopper would be seeing as like not that much of like hypothetical would be along the lines like Hopper would be like totally feeling so like Hopper is usually worried for like Owens because in actually like Hopper would be totally seeing Owens as like the only person that would like totally lead like the Hopper's like fight against like the living of the value and like face not like without Owens like I'm looking like Hopper would be totally feeling blank and like totally not having would be feeling as if like you don't have a clue as to like where to as to like what action to take next. Definitely remember so definitely I'm looking so like during that time like I'm looking like Mike uh with like offer right now taking the decision and telling Mike that like they're going to wait like I'm looking like even after like after hours of waiting like I'm looking like still they're not receiving any information about Owens like the scenario that I'm looking and at that point like I'm looking Mike getting totally irritated and angry and like offer and Mike totally shouting back at offer and basically telling Hopper that they have to basically find a way to basically find sitting there and not doing anything that won't solve the problem will be along the lines of like Mike at that point get angry and shouting back at like Hopper at that point like the scenario that I'm in. So like it would be during this time that as like Hopper will be getting chased with Mike that I was to bring that the unexpected thought happening in like for like hopper, and that will be from like Owens like the scenario that I'm going to create. So like at that point, like I'm just like Owens telling Hopper that basically, and at that point, like Hopper will be okay, please. So like I'm just like Hopper telling Owens that basically that they are at like Will's home. And at that point, self-purpose like 11 will be trying to like quickly snatch away like the phone from like Owens's like the scenario where I'm right. But like I'm looking like due to like the destruction like created by then would have created by like the Facebook monster in that control room as well. Like I'm looking like resulting in like the those phone lines getting damaged or those phones that phone getting damaged, and that way like the exactly like as like 11 would be quickly snatching like the phones to like totally so that absolute the friend desire to like speak to like Mike proper like Mike's nearby, and that way for like 11 to like finally speak to like Mike again and like so here like and then that as like 11 would be quickly snatching the phone like I'm looking like the phone getting damaged, and basically like 11 not being able to like talk to like Mike at that point like the scenario that so like definitely still Mike not realizing that like about like doing survival just like the 11 being alive into the person is like the scenario that I'm doing that way like 11 with like a free space like telling someone that basically to take 11 so like I'm also bring at that point for like 11 was like kind of would see the space like that telling Owens to like take 11 to Mike so like the scenario that I'm doing and when like I'm looking straight away it was like 11 would be okay so that by from all the run to make it to like turn up the laboratory and everything so new from this so definitely that way like Owens like taking one of those like bands and they like or like cars basically like trying to limit to like build something at that point like now that I'm doing. So like at that point I was like element totally knocking at the door of like build sound and I was like at that point like hop up like opening the door and I'm looking for like hop up totally like shocked to like see along with like Owens like 11 along with like Owens and at that point would be when I was like that absolute reunion happening between like Mike and like 11. It's like the scenario that I'm so like I'm doing like at that point I'm connected to be exactly 12 o'clock, 12 a.m. and like the next day would have begun. So like my three impressions for like the scenario to be like the moment like Hopper will be opening the door and will be shocked to see 11 and 11 will be like seeing Mike at that point like from that the things like with home like and Mike as well for be shocked to like see 11. So like during the exact time like I'm looking like the clock striking like the sound of the clock striking 12 a.m. That will be what they will be hearing, and that will be exactly like the next day, and that next day will be exactly the 360th uh, day. That basically the anniversary day since like 11 has disappeared from like Mike's life, and Mike has disappeared from like 11 life. It's like the scenario that I'm going to go to. Like, so like that way, like the reunion between like 11 and Mike having affected his home. This is like the scenario that I'm going to go to bring about again. Okay, so like the new trends right now with like for Joyce right now being at like such a rock bottom kind of like a situation with like losing her like precious dog and having using witness like screen and finding way that like on top of that like her having to that having to have like witness the screen right way which uh, uh in which that dog died and basically that coupled with like the fact that like build situations like probably usually getting worse and worse up with like build being more getting more and more controlled by like the monsters of like the battle world and everything like so like currently this like with like the person with like choice being in such an extreme rock bottom kind of like a situation that liberating that silicon and written for that it would be definitely in this very nice that I'm like 11 like the reunion between like not only just like 11 and Mike, but like 11 and all of them, including like George as well, happening on very united like the scenario that I'm putting. And definitely like for like George was like in like such an extreme rock bottom kind of situation, like something like 11 would be such an absolute relief and like would be such an absolute beacon of hope of like basically that person that was a bit of feeling, I think like strongly as like 11 that absolutely really can comfort through in like 11 as like that person that might actually be able to like turn everything around even though like Joyce won't be able to like get that Bob like still at least that the at least like through 11 like she might be able to save will be also along the line save will as well as like turn the whole situation around through 11. Will be along the line 11 to different lack of that have the feeling that I'm a different lack. Joyce definitely would be feeling at that point of like scenario that I was delivering. And that's for like might and the others like I'm delivering like the moment I'm delivering like through 11 like I'm delivering definitely them totally 11 actually like would be revealing to like Mike and the others that like this entire time like it was like offer that was like hiding 11 so in that time that like within that time 11 wasn't like talking and basically it was like solely according to that copper and this like rules that was also in that 11 didn't we might and all that like I'm looking like once like 11 would be revealing that I'm looking like at that point I'm totally prepping like a comical kind of like a scenario where like I'm totally prepping like the growth of like not only Mike but like Mike local and Dustin totally getting extremely enraged and angry with like Copper and then totally like shouting out at like Copper for like hiding and keeping 11 from them for like an entire 4 years. It's like the scenario said I'm losing all the and again. Yet like after like Copper totally handling that in a good way and in a good and like a light manner. Especially because like Copper as well would be extremely relieved. Not least because of like Copper uh, finding Hopper like being 11 again, but like also specifically due to like especially since like the current situations like an extreme kind of like a situation like uh, especially so like with like the survival of like Owens like within that be an extreme relief for like Hopper. I think for because like Hopper they only seeing like that like Owens will be able to like take them ahead as to like what they have to do you know, like continue the fight against like the spreading of like, the parallel as they want to and everything. Get online, Hopper will be feeling at that point. So like Hopper could be like in also like a like kind of like state at that point. On seeing Owen as well as like 11 together. It's also like late month event. So like the situation lightening up slowly bit by bit once like 11 and Owens that way would be making their entrance to like a win home from that point on. It's like the eventual scenario that I'm visiting right now on trains. Okay, so like definitely the emotion right now with like my right now being that like the shadow monster, it's like the brain that controls it, you know, the other monsters like definitely but I think like still the shadow monster would be like a small fraction of like all the great number of monsters out there within like the carry world is definitely so like the shadow monster will be only one among like the great army of huge number of like shadow monsters that will just spread across like the entire the carry world is definitely and I'm delivering it there to be like a monster that's like even far bigger than like even like the shadow monsters. And that would be like it's what I'm still in my inspiration would be like the source monster, like the true origin of like all the like monsters that you know them right now. So like I'm looking like I'm looking that to be like a total huge tree that which would be present in like the underground in like the battlefield. It would be like an extremely huge giant tree that would be extremely alive and will be able to like attack and defend itself and all this like and basically it will be extremely powerful and ability like for that so much of to be like a huge underground tree from which like all these like points from like the battle world will be spreading across from like the battle world to like all direction across like, the battle world and might have even enter through like the gates and maybe right now even spreading into that the real world as well. The point in that the be like the upside down underground tunnel as well. All that like spread from like the gate and in like the underground section of the laboratory. Those points would be like extending all the way from the gates to all the way deep into like the parallel world as well. And basically to it that point eventually reaching that source mode of the minimum it would be the giant enormous like living and attacking a push underground tree that will be able to like totally merge and attack the settling of the that will be the source monster of that. And I'm speaking to my friends, so it will be only the destruction of the source monster alone that can like undo everything, like all the spreading of the viral word and everything, and the complete elimination of all the faces monsters and everything would only be simultaneously possible only if like that actual giant source monster, that giant tree source monster like things for human prevention. Only if that is trying to be extremely difficult to that destroy that giant tree. Because like it will be extremely awkward stepping into the reserve, even way more stronger and powerful and dangerous than even like the shadow monster stepping in frame. So like destroying like the shadow monster would be like my that like the conclusion that I'm looking right now. So my theory is like right now that Mike would be coming down to would be that like it isn't like right now things that it is shadow monster is like the brain that controls everything like I'm doing like definitely to the end of like my theory and but they bring like my telling like because understand all of them like literally like that they have to focus on like destroying like the shadow monster and destroying and bring down like the shadow monster that like they bring down like the shadow monster like they will be able to like save the real world from the spreading of the bad word and undo everything. So the along the lines of the bring up like a composite that like Michael is coming down to and I'm looking like totally everyone totally believing that like I'm looking definitely straight away like I'm looking like offer as well as all of the things that basically that makes me thought of self. But like I'm doing like so like that way I'm able to connect them then I'm able to connect usually one like 11 Fuji like returning like I'm able to connect them or like collectively as like a team and with like 11 superpowers like I'm able to connect and definitely eventually I'm able to bring carry as well would be like showing up to like talking to and I'm able to definitely still think about the friends on that like Cali will be talking missing 11. So like I'm looking like Cali, that will be badly and desperately wanting to like go back to meet 11 and be with 11. So like I was doing not to that make that happen. Like I'm showing definitely Cali most likely would be like putting in all that hard work and effort into like trying to like achieve like the power of being able to access like the dark void and that way so that like Cali will be able to like find 11. So like I'm putting that way Cali putting in that absolute hard work and effort into like being able to like achieve that power and eventually working out for Cali and Cali finally achieving that very same location detection like communication that access to like the dark void that 11 has like Cali has been finally getting that so Cali hard work is like in that way Cali locating 11 and I'm looking for like maybe like the scenario being like by the time all of them would be like 11 and all of them would be finally finalized in their final team like enormous like owns of health like and finally they'll be like creating their army to like really to like integrate and enter into like the parallel world through the gates in like the lovely laboratory and find like the shadow monster and attack and bring down like the shadow monster like basically and Amazon like them so the Amazon like it will be always that Amazon like will be coming over to strategy like not just to like the battle world attack like the shadow monster but to like find out but with that absolute stealth to even move within like the panel with that absolute stealth and to like secretly observe like the shadow monster and that way with that absolute stealth to like eventually figure out like the layer of like the shadow monster where the shadow monster uh basically rest in so that like while the shadow monster will be resting like for at that point for them to like probably like make an ambush attack and basically set up some sort of a trap and basically that way to like take out the shadow monster. Which is like the shadow monster like extremely scary like I'm looking definitely through like this description like I'm looking definitely so like once this will be the plan that I'm looking to you know exactly once that will become the system you know that way like while they would all be like preparing like the huge army and they will be planning on like setting up they about to set up to like the parallel world like right before right at that moment is when I was looking like the team of like Gary as well as like the Gary like can of office like also be showing up like scenario that I'm doing that way like that would be how like I'm doing that way like Gary as well as like the can of office or Gary at all ending up at that very last moment like being part of like the army that would be heading on to like the parallel world to like say bring down like the shadow was just definitely my good game. So definitely that way, like I'm looking like exactly like how like this whole theory that like Mike right now is like talking about like I'm looking for come to that eventual future scenario where like I'm looking like exactly like how in like the update game like basically in like the beginning of the season two how in like the update game that like Mike Dustin looks I think like I or like Dustin I think like has played like basically there was this game about like the destroying like the dragon layer like I'm really like that eventually ending up being an actor for Sharon with like Mike and all of them like basically setting off like basically and all of them like basically elements like eleven like setting off to like the bad word to like that way destroy like the shadow monsters in there and like basically that destroy the shadow monster's lair while the shadow monster will be resting in that lair and that way to that such a strategy to like take out like the shadow monster. Basically. So definitely I'm specifically mentioning that like the shadow monster's lair would definitely be under ground. So like the giant shadow monster will be having like a huge lair somewhere underground within like the barrel and basically and that really not very much right now it's for like this like natural scenario where according to the remission definitely something like Popper and all of them will be creating this army along with like Cali as well as like 11 like will be all setting off to like the parent world to like bring down like the shadow monster by like destroying the layer of like the shadow monster while like the shadow monster will be trusting in its layer of the this is like the scenario going to scenario that I'm going still and because like regardless of like the trap they will be setting up like I'm going like still that attempt to play that part is that scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm like them setting up that trap and basically like that trap setting in like basically like the shadow monster getting injured while resting in its like layer of like within the scenario that happened. Yet like I'm talking the shadow monster will be far more significantly stronger than and tougher than like they would all have escaped stepping in the direction. That way like I'm talking even though the shadow monster will be getting so that trap like I'm talking like the shadow monster will be getting injured like still like I'm talking like they won't be able to like take out like the shadow monster. So like at that point like on realizing their plan and strategy has like backfired to like take out like the shadow monster that strategy has backfired like at that point I'm looking like all of them would be like trying to like get away from like the giant shadow monster, which would be like extremely enraged and would be trying to like take each and every single one of them out. Like the scenario that I'm doing. That way, like I'm just like eventually I'm just like it would be like the combined team effort of like 11 as well as Cali doing it have to put everything into their superpower, into their telekinesis powers and using it against like the shadow monster, but that have to do from combined team effort, like another like the combined telekinesis like power will be like send out as like an ultimate attack against like the shadow monster, which would be finally would be what like would be saving Hopper and all of them from like the superior ultimate strength of like the and toughness of it, the shadow monster. And that we have to like finally to be through 11 and Cali that I'm looking like they will be like bring down with their combined effort that I'm looking like they will be bring down like the shadow monster to definitely might be real. So definitely, and this would be that like in that update game like basically that like Dustin had played in like the beginning of like season 2 like basically since it was said that basically that I think like Joe said that the requirement there being the need for like some sort in order for like them in order for like, the game like the player character to be able to like bring down like or like destroy like the dragon's lair like and so that sword would be like precisely 11 as well as Cali specifically Cali as well it's definitely my that would be what that sword might have foreshadowed back then. Uh, might have been might this is like my personal impression for like in the scenario that I'm looking. Okay, so like doing so right now for like the simple theory of like the basis monsters being from one dimension and like I think like the shadow monsters being from another dimension. And the difference actually I think remember think that like that might in fact actually be the case, like even with the inactivity might be the case in your space. So in like what might have happened would be that especially with, like the battle world always like pitch black dark all the time like there are no there seems to be no sun or like star or even moon in like the battle world. Like I'm doing what might have happened would be that number something like in like the grading system, the timeline will be totally different in like the battle world when compared to like the real world. It's definitely more different. Yet like it's definitely more interesting. Yet like the fact that like there are like the very same buildings in like the real world seems to be present in like the battle world as well. So like definitely my company impression right now is that basically what might have happened in like the battle world in like the distant past like and might have been like that might have definitely so like exactly like how there are like that very same similar kind of like buildings in like the real world in like the battle world as well. Which is like I think that so Hopper and Joes have been to like I think like Will's home to like the battle world in like the house. So like I'm definitely because this is an definitely for regretting that. Say like the battle world there might have not it might not just be the same buildings alone, but like the same people as well, like parallel versions of like the same people think like the human world like other than who might have at one point might have existed in like the parallel world. That's the mean theory and so like what might have happened in like the past might have been. like it might have been like the parallel version of Pranav. I'm still remember the mention that like it might have been like the parallel version of Pranav in his like experiment, like basically using like the very same parallel version of 11 to that totally using like 11's like the parallel version of 11 like like the parallel version of might have opened up like again in like the parallel world in like the basket very much so like I'm going like what might have happened to be like that opening of that gate by like that version of like 11 might have been like totally different kind of like a lot of different kind of a scenario than when like Pranav had opened like uh, than when 11 had opened the actual real world 11 had opened the gates from like the real world about the definitely interesting like in the case of like while like the parallel version of like 11 might have opened like the gates in like the parallel like what might have happened to be like first of all the gate might have been a whole lot larger than like the gate when that than the size of the gate that it initially was when like 11 had like the real world 11 had opened it in like the parameter example. And on top of that, like basically like the parallel world like the parallel world had opened the gates like and like great number of like straight away like the dimension to its like the dimension connected to like the faceless model where like the dimension where like the realm or like the place where like the dimension is like the faceless of all the faceless models where they also said like the things might have been what might have initially opened up through that state opening up to like the battle might have been what might have by like the battle might have been what might have happened to like and I'm separating like the for like a faceless monsters as well as like a humanoid faceless monsters. Like you'll be all different types of like monsters belonging to the same dimensions that Newman gets. And this might be the reason for like them both having like the common factor of like them having like their faceless features while faceless characteristics while the fact that like the shadow monster in fact has traits like I'm considering so the Liam is bring that much theory to be exactly right that like the shadow monster will be able to take from a completely different dimension when compared to that dimension of it. Was definitely one thing. So like I'm considering then what might have happened would be that through lag, due to lag, the parallel motion of you like I'm considering the parallel world like what might have happened would be like in the recent past it might have been like totally different scenario but like it might have been not like one of the scientists parallel version of like a scientist or partner like maybe possibly betraying or secretly probably that without sort of real finding out like after without sort of realizing like basically like trying to like take credit for like kind of experience by like maybe stealthily like using like the parallel version of below to like open up like the gate that looks kind of like might have been what might have happened in like the, with like in like system path with like 11 in like the real world opening the gates in like the real world another than 11 systems but like in like the parallel world like what might have happened would be like it might have been like the parallel world in front of himself like in the presence of like evaluation of production like ordering like the parallel version of 11 to open up the gate. And basically, so like the gate might have the valuation of 11 might have opened up the gates, and then the people that the gate might have opened up to even a bigger size. And so like straight away at that point, then what might have happened would be like a great number of faceless monsters like might have came rushing into that like a huge army might have came rushing straight away into the barrel what might have been what might have happened with the frameworks. And these barrel and then the weapon like these that themselves might have most likely maybe taken the life of that Dharna, or like the barrel versions from might have managed to like escape. And definitely and that concept like the barrel these cases motors might have straight away not taken the life of like the bad version of Villain, but might have straight away abducted like the bad version of Villain. The element it is like the present situation in like the in like the present situation that the four legged like physical monsters have taken the life of Bob. While in like the past like the faceless monsters that were in like humanoid form had like each and every single time that it has these monsters have only abducted but not taken the life of like any humans. I think that we need like about so definitely there's different like so like I'm different like what might be the reason for this difference would be like would be actually due to like the shadow. monster like electrical like controlling in that chase the monsters that resulting in that the shadow also giving like the resist monsters like order to like eliminate all humans and everything. Could be around the line of the shadow also might have through its like control will be given to like the faces monsters like controlling certain but like in the case of like the original intent of like the faceless monsters in like while they have made their entrance into like the parallel through like the opening up of like the gate within like the parallel maybe through like the past like the parallel not like making like the parallel of the event open up right place like at that point I'm looking at what might have happened will be that these uh, cases monsters might have affected 11 and might have lacked 11 into like a similar kind of like a situation as that of that the situation which like will was like put into like the past in like the parallel with that thing over like will mouth and like will being put into scrap that situation while like proper angles that found in like the band so like I'm doing like 11 like the band was not 11 as well might have been put into such a similar kind of a situation but like for like the battle version of 11 might have not gotten at the end that competition that whole process with like that thing in like the mouth and basically fit into like a trap like situation that basically that process might have fully been ended up getting completed. And once it was completed, what might have happened would be that the fan version of 11 might have turned into like a humanoid faceless monster, might have been what might have happened. And this exact another thing at that point, like the fan version of 11 might have lost all of uh, all of human memory mainly, and like might have only had like monster instinct at that point, supplementary. So like that way, like the face monster during the that for initial inspiration to like the Babylon at that point, like they might have affected and like transform 11 through such a manner to like one among them to changing to causing that transformation to like possibly causing that transformation to like 11 and turning like the battle version of 11 into like faceless monster might have been what might have happened. That's definitely number to a faceless humanoid monster might have been what might have happened. Definitely number and this exact faceless uh, humanoid monster, which like the albums of Devon might have transformed, might have been possibly transformed into, might have been that exact faceless humanoid monster that they flee. While 11, I think, the real world 11, that during that kind of experiment in that, while I think that Prophet of Spain has entered into like the dark void space and access like dark void, like basically that uh, faceless humanoid monster that tried to like communicate with 11 back then from like the dark void might have been actually that the parallel version of that 11. Who might have gotten transformed into like the faces model, especially when and might be the reason for like I think that back then I think that basically 11 totally screaming that basically for like some point like in like the past like basically 11 had screamed that basically that 11 is like a monster would be definitely due to the freaking remember it because like back then during that the real world experience like experiment of like the real world 11 like at that point when 11 had access like the dark void for like the first time and so you see in this that phase most of at that point like 11 might have definitely had some telepathic power that might have briefly might have been able to like read or sense like the memories of like that faceless monster at that point and might have seen that like might have found out that at that point that itself that basically might have been able to sense and realize might have had that shocking realization that basically that faceless monster was like at one point in like the past was like just exactly like 11 was exactly 11 might be along the lines like 11 might have realized at that point. It's definitely 11 range. So that this might be the reason for like 11 film saying 11 is like a monster. We don't have said like 11 is like a monster at one point in like the past. Just maybe because like 11 might have not realized that like that faceless monster being because like 11 might have not realized that like there existed like of like the positive like there existing like a parallel version of 11 in like the parallel world at one point in like the past. And so like 11 might have only felt that like what 11 might have seen in that monster might have been like something that's like within 11 itself, like that like the 11 deep down might be in actuality might be like a monster. Basically waiting to like immediately transform into uh like what 11 might have seen might have been that faces monster that like 11 might have seen like the last one might have been maybe like the future of like 11 that 11 might have seen from like the perspective through the dark. So it might be along the line the event might have felt, and maybe this might be the reason for like 11 each of the person might be maybe even might be keeping the secret, but like 11 they come getting that basically maybe eventually like secret 11 might turn into there's like some reason like 11 which like 11 ourselves might not know that only due to like seeing that it was monster in like the dark void and basically hopefully having like through the her telepathy because having sense that like that is monster was one 11 like 11 we could only think that like the real word 11 we could only think that like if 11 eventually feeds up to you like 11 in the transforming into that to the thing like that it's like face was not so here and then like 11 will be talking feeling into the person with the even so like 11 yet will be talking actually having that tension and fear of the connecting to this possibility and basically that 11 might have kept this that the secret from Mike and because I'm part of the even through the process even till the point like where like 11 had disappeared a year back like even till that point like 11 might have constantly kept that that fears of 11 the secret from Mike and I think might have been what might have happened sitting in your brain. So like my emotions were like in that distant past, like I remember the emotion one, even the battle version of 11 might have been forcefully transformed into like a humanoid face, like on the different like at that point, like basically 11 might have straight away ended up being like the leader of like the army of like the famous monsters that might have infiltrated due to that very same experiment of like the parallel version of that runner might have at that point during that time by then like might have infiltrated the gate with the gate opening and like those pieces of months of army might have infiltrated into like the parallel world might have been what might have happened in like the million frame. So like that way since like 11 has like 11's like telepathic powers as well as like superpowers like and even after like the transformation happening and 11 might have lost 11's like 11 like memories of back when 11 was like human, but like and might have had through the transformation might have had like the monster instinct taking over like 11. And since then, like 11 might have been seeing 11 as like one of the other monsters, faceless monsters, nothing even brain, which is so definitely like at that point with that absolute monster instinct, like 11 might have and coupled with like still, and even after that transformation, 11 might have still retain that like superpowers of 11, like Pelican and telepathic powers of 11 is definitely one thing. So like that way, like 11 might have been special among like special and strong among like all the remaining faceless monsters army. That like that way 11 might have became like the leader, might have been what might have the bad version of 11 that way might have became the was like the humanoid. Might have became like the humanoid faceless monster. This might have been like the leader of all those like great number of like army of like humanoid cases of monsters as well as like the army of like the four-legged cases of monsters might have been what might have happened in like in Barca, especially my variant. So like I'm looking that way like 11 the panel version of 11 would be transformed into like the humanoid cases of monsters like it being like the leader it might have like order like the remaining like race of monsters to like take over with its like monster instinct to like take over like that battle world. So like I'm looking back then like I'm looking like the battle world in actuality might have been exactly in the that of like the real world is definitely not correct. So like it might have had like some as well as like everything like it might have had like some events and stuff and moon and everything is definitely like the battle world is definitely but like I'm looking like initially what might have happened would be like it might have been like the tear that might have created within like the parallel version of the kind of like energy level being like the parallel world that might have expanded and kept on expanding eventually to like and I'm like so like initially because of the song and basically everything like because of like what's the possibility according to the like the parallel world as well having like the song and everything like I'm different like the takeover for like the parallel version of like the humanoid monster of like the parallel version of like 11 and like the face monster of like take over like uh the entirety of like the parallel world and eliminate take over like the parallel world and then there's strategy as well like the parallel version of 11 like if want to strategy as well to like take over like the human world uh in like the take over like parallel world might have been also different like without like elimination of like the humans like the strategy might have been to like abduct and basically to totally abstract like documents and basically by converting and creating that transformation like exactly like in like the parallel verse state like to transform each and every single human into like by placing that thing by wrapping them and placing that thing on their mouth to that to have that transformation happening into that from human to like the faceless monster to each and every single human and that way to in a transformative manner to like take over like the entirety of like the humans in like the parallel world. Parallel version of humans in like the parallel world might have been like the parallel version of that decision of that as like the faceless monster. The name of the image. So definitely it might be like still like when they might have like these faceless monsters, all of them might have been struggling because of like the presence of like the sun. So like my premise is that like even though it might have been extremely difficult due to like the presence of like sun, like it might have been extremely difficult initially for like the faceless monster parallel version of 11 as well as like the faceless monster army to like take over like the parallel world. Like even though initially it might have been difficult, like considering that eventually I'm considering like the gate, the more it kept on expanding, like I was like the situation becoming more and more easier for for like the parallel version of 11 and like the other basic models definitely will be interesting because like and the more the gate might have expanded like I'm looking like the gate might have expanded not only underneath to like the underground but also towards like the sky as well. Definitely will be interesting. Like literally and the gate might have expanded in like a way more faster pace than like the gates are right now expanding in like the actual real human world is definitely an inspiration back in like the past in like the parallel world might have been what might have happened is certain information. So like that way like once like the gate might have like expanded the gate in like the parallel world from like the end of the level being like the parallel world might have expanded all the way into like it's reaching like the sky and like basically totally taking over like the gate expanding and taking over spreading over the entirety of like the sky might have happened and that then number is like once like the expanding of the gate might have fully completed through like the entirety of the parallel world. At that point, I'm just like the entirety of like it might be at that point and might be through such a manner that like the entirety of the parallel world might have ended up losing its like sunlight and turned fully dark, especially in the ranges. So like, this might have been such an extreme advantage to like the Facebook most of 11 parallel version of 11 and like 11 might have been what might have happened if the element of the range. So that way, like I'm going that they might have totally and that taken that might have been what might have made it possible for like 11 and that the parallel version of 11 and like the parallel version of 11 like this was most of army to be able to like eventually take over like the entirety of like the human world entirety of like, the parallel world might have been what might have happened. That's definitely the so like definitely the emergence of that basically since in like the past like basically since like the faceless humanoid not have had like not try to like take the life out like neither will no Barbara but instead had basically affected both Will as well as Barbara and brought them to like the parallel world since like that was exactly what like the faceless humanoid monsters had done in like the past when compared to right now in like the present like the faceless form like a monster straight away attacking and taking the life form. Like I'm going that this will be due to like that difference in like the leadership of like the faceless monster. So definitely remember as well. Like I'm doing during like the affection of Will and Barbara, like I'm doing like it might have been like the parallel version of 11 transformed into like the faceless monster. In like the parallel world, that might have been like the leader of like those faceless monsters back then. Definitely remember it. And then like I'm looking like if in fact like it's not like the if that so my question is that basically if in fact like the Barbara that has died is not like the parallel version of Barbara, but if it's in fact like the actual Barbara that has died in like the parallel world, that like 11 had seen the body the corpse of like through the dark void like then to bring like that death of like Barbara after like the abduction of Barbara might have definitely happened solely due to like it being solely during around that time that like the stab. So like I believe that might be due to like it might be during then that like the giant spider like Shaman or something might have slowly made their entrance from their dimension to like the battlefield and might have started off like the slowly started off like the controlling of like the faceless monsters great number of like faceless monsters from army present in like the parallel during that time. Definitely over the like it might have been like a faceless model that might have been controlled by like the shadow network that might have taken the life of like Barbara, especially even after like abducting Barbara, since like the humanoid monster could have taken like the life of like Barbara the moment it had so Barbara in like Steve's home back then, like so that contrast happening with like Barbara being abducted and then getting eliminated might have considering right now might have been due to like this change in like this might have been due to like this like entrance of like all this like shadow monster into like the parallel of new Ukraine. I'm still seeing the mention that like there won't be just with the single shadow monster, then shadow monster, but like there will be a whole army of like shadow monster. During that time that might have entered into like the parallel world. During that time it took new Ukraine. And what might have made it even possible for like the shadow monster to end up into like the parallel world from their dimension might have been like the factor of like the gates from like the PAL version of Primus, like an earlier level, expanding to like the point of like it taking over the entirety of the sky. And basically that way, like the entirety of the PAL world being consumed by like multiple dimensions. Which definitely what might have happened is definitely when the so like it might have been through such a manner that like the shadow monster from a totally different dimension might have got access to like the PAL world and might have appeared to like the PAL world might have been what might have happened. It's definitely my personal understanding. So like my personal understanding that like unlike the faceless humanoid monsters that can probably easily create like gates and tiny gates and portals and traveling between like the real world and like the parallel world. Like I'm thinking like for like the giant shadow monster, even though they will be a whole lot stronger, they won't be having like the power to be to create like portals and basically to travel between dimensions through such a management period. So like what might have definitely made it possible for like the giant shadow monster to access and to able to like show up to like the parallel world might have definitely been this like gate from like the parallel version of like another laboratory expanding to like the point of that it totally creating that all throughout like the entirety of like sky, all throughout like the entirety of like, the parallel world. And that might be how like the light might have completely disappear. And basically like multiple dimensions might have consumed like the parallel and certainly my impressions that like that way even though like the shadow monster might at that point might have might have had access to like the parallel still like the shadow monster might have taken like the shadow monster quite a while maybe great number of years before like the shadow monsters might have even realized that it had access to like this new parallel world and might have then it might be only at that point like the parallel shadow monsters might have even showed up to like the parallel world start controlling like the pace of monsters. Might have been what might have happened certainly with the reinvention. So until then it might have been like and like the parallel version of like 11 transformed into like the faceless monster that might have remained as like the leader of like the all the faceless monsters with like the bad words might have been what like happened certainly when the like I'm putting like in the present like I'm looking definitely the shadow monster might have definitely taken control of like even like the parallel version of 11 that has like transformed into that would have transformed into like the leader king of like the all the faces that leader might have only in like the person might have probably gotten like controlled by like the might be in like person will be controlled by like the shadow market right now. Definitely might have the empathy. So like my references are like like in the case of like Will as well as like Barbara, that the faceless like humanoid monsters initially had like abducted them and they really taken their life in like the beginning and like right now with like the faceless monsters are right now even though like in that form like like still like the fact that the faceless monster right now is like for the extremely dangerous to the point of like straight away attacking and trying to like eliminate humans like especially with like the recent type of form and everything like I'm looking like that so like I'm looking actually all these like faceless monsters would be like deep down feeling extremely frustrated because like all these faceless monsters will be extremely getting controlled against their will. This is definitely my personal impression. So like the faceless monsters would be totally against what like the control of like the and what the things that like the shadow monster will be making like the face monster. So right now, even to like the person is definitely will but like they will be still powerless. Like it will be solely due to that superior power for things control that the shadow monster we have known the face monster would be the reason for like the faces monster getting controlled by the shadow monster, especially when the naturally like the faces monster might be deep down desiring to like rebellion against like the shadow monster, but they simply won't be able to. So really the like superior power of the shadow monster might be the gift element. So like I'm hoping maybe that way like I'm like eventually definitely with this like whole theory of like Nassim and Mike like I'm thinking definitely eventually like along with like 11 eventually definitely I'm thinking along like 11 as well as carry like then entering into like the backward and then finally struggling their way into like into bring down one of them the shadow monster like scenario that I'm thinking at that. So that way I'm looking for once like the shadow monster will be like brought down and eliminated like I'm looking like at that point that then definitely will be getting saved and I'm thinking like the spreading of the wine towards like feel like the top tokens as well to be like actually coming under, but still I'm going to bring the belief for there to be like way more great number of shadow monsters out there. And I'm definitely pressing still able to bring at that point it would be only like the control of like the shadow monster or this like great number of that cases monsters that would be like coming under with like the elimination of the shadow monster at that point. Then the scenario that I'm so like the points from like the gates as well will be that hopefully getting right now like the control time will be like extended and hopefully we made to like spread through into like the town of Hawkins and everything is definitely going to so like all that points will be back will be getting back their own will and basically that way all just points on the story maybe like returning back to like the back towards the gate is like the scenario that I'm going for. And like I'm thinking like at that point like all the faces numbers as well will be getting back their will as well. Definitely much training. And I'm looking for definitely even with like the elimination of the shadow monster like all these like dark like faceless monsters and all won't be instantly getting eliminated along won't be getting eliminated along with like the shadow monster like the scenario that I was right. That way like exactly like how we would be not time with like the elimination of like the shadow monster like like the scenario that I'm doing like we're not dying but like will the spreading of like the wire of like the shadow monster uh to will like coming under and that way like the similar effect happening with like the Facebook monsters as well. The four-legged Facebook monsters as well like and the control of the shadow monster like coming under and like the Facebook monster still being alive but like them that way at that point being a whole lot less aggressive at that point of like the scenario that I'm them not at all being aggressive but like uh, uh, than in like the present like the scenario that I'm observing. That way like I'm thinking like this whole situation eventually are setting and like I'm observing like let me one among them coming to like the conclusion but like eventually it will be like 11 that might eventually figure things out eventually in like the future and I'm like then setting up that next goal after like eliminating the shadow monster. Eventually, I'm doing like in like the instant future, like I'm certain like it would not like elements that would be like deciding to like their through their discussion eventually them coming down to like the possibility of like basically them coming into like a serious situation where like I'm doing like more shadow monsters somebody connect with and I'm especially putting like there will be a whole army in like the front of like the shadow monsters, giant shadow monsters in like the parallel in the region. Each of those shadow monsters will be connected, but like no in less enough manner as to like how like the shadow monster connect like and controls all the faces monsters within the region. The connection between like the shadow monsters between the army of shadow monsters would be in such a way that they believe even if like one shadow monster gets eliminated, like the other shadow monsters won't be getting going through any pain or like won't be ending up dying, but like the other shadow monsters will be easily able to like realize that like one among them has been taken out. So definitely when we them, definitely like the elimination of like that single shadow monster, which I'm going to definitely injury happening, would be enraging that whole army of like shadow monsters that will be spread across like the parallel event and it will there will be like the elimination of that single shadow monster and basically like attracting the attention of all the great number of army of like shadow monsters and them all will be showing up to like the location where like uh, Mike and all of them would have naturally eliminated that single shadow monster and them back to like the raiders like the scenario that I'm looking at them and I'm looking that way like I'm looking like the great army of like shadow monsters like eventually planning something huge to like bring down like the to take over like the entire expected when world is like in the scenario that I'm in. And I'm looking like during this time like the game as well like I'm looking like will be keeping on and I'm looking like maybe it would be through like the controls of like the shadow monster that like I'm looking the game as well that they are which was created in like the energy laboratory run of like definitely like run of would be like brilliant enough of like the scientists that basically runner would be according to that just like logic and everything that he might have done the research and experiment of like runner might have by in deciding to like use element to like create that uh, opening within like uh, to create that case from like the real world to like the parallel from his lab. Like at that point, definitely Brandon might have been absolutely certain that like the case won't be spreading. Like it would be like the unexpected entrance of like shadow monsters that might have resulted in like the case predict so much. So like the shadow monster really forcefully using their powers, using their controlling powers to like control the vines and everything. And that way, by controlling the vines, then the status might be the shadow monster that might be that maybe that's another possibility that I'm doing. It might be like the percent that would be like increasing like the that might be increasing like the pair of like the of like the gate within like Fernandson and Developers, like also like the other problem that I'm doing. So like if that's the case, then I was like even in like the parallel world where like according to the written like the parallel version of runner might have probably use like the parallel version of elements to like create a similar kind of like a tear within like the parallel world as well in like the stem path. Even in that point as well, I was like maybe it might have instantly like the instantly the shadow monster from like the other lines might have noticed it there and I was like they might have done the very same thing in like the bad and might have manipulated the vines and that and the bad might have done it like absolute random to like stop that maybe and maybe like he might have created and so like maybe that way maybe it might have been through the work of like the shadow monster that like that hate might have spread and might have taken over like the entire in the sky and like the underground of like the battle world and might have that way consume the like the financial consuming like the battle world and find eventually making like that full access possible for like the giant shadow monster to end up into like the ending right into like the parallels what might have been what might have happened like other possibility that I'm doing. So like this way like I'm doing eventually I'm looking definitely for like such an eventual scenario where like the death of like the elimination of like single shadow monster like these not only angering but like uh angering like all the other army of like shadow monsters and basically they all like basically uh using all of their powers to like basically to like basically maybe increase like the size of the gate and basically maybe eventually them all trying to like infiltrate into like the real world and straight away like launch their army kind of like a shadow monster back into like the real world. It is such kind of like a situation eventually like the process leading towards it like I'm like even maybe like figuring that out even they that like also like looking at that I'm doing so like I'm looking like to prevent all this like from happening like I'm doing maybe during this time, like I'm looking maybe of like also like a possibility of like maybe around some point in like the future, distant future around the blueprint like 11 totally in 11 like the discussion with like Mike and one of them like I'm doing like them 11 maybe like revealing to them of like having in like the past like in like the dark poet having seen like faceless monster trying to like communicate with like 11 instead of like acting aggressively or like trying to attack 11 like the faceless monster that was like trying to like communicate with like 11 and basically 11 along with 11 telling Mike and also that like 11 so totally see herself in like even though the like it was like a monster it was like a faceless monster still like 11 to like somewhere see 11 in that phase of mental along the line to 11 to be telling Mike and all them. So like I'm looking like that way, them telling 11 to like once again I'm going to like the dark world and try to like communicate with that exact specific faceless motor and that way like through that communication I'm maybe 11 at that point communicating with the faceless motor, humanoid motor and like at that point like, 11 finding out the truth about like the parallel version of like 11 existing, not only 11 but like 11 existing like two step one point in like parallel world and all that like so that way like I'm looking like 11 would be that and I'm looking like after like the elimination of like the shadow monster definitely this exact parallel version of 11 who would be like who would have transformed into that humanoid form is monster like will be also free and from like the control of like the shadow monster so like I'm looking that way like I'm looking like eventually Mike and all of them like figuring out strategies to like basically to like basically to get the that leader shadow that leader face with not the humanoid not the 4G like parallel version of it on their side to fight alongside those to team up with those army of faceless monsters with the team of Mike and all of them, and for them to really team up and fight off against the incoming army attack of the great number of shadow monsters. Basically such an eventual future possible scenario of may be happening in the computer, also continuing on the break. So that way a large scale war happening between the giant shadows army of the shadow monsters versus the giant army, the great number of army of the faceless monster and 11 as well as Tally as well as all the remaining failed experiments of runner as well as Mike and Hopper and all and Owens and Owens security was in runner and just and our post and everything that way an absolute fight happened, battle happened. This also getting into the system is about scenario that I'm looking all in the trend. Okay, so the flavor frames right now with Mike feeling will be knowing the weakness of the shadow muscle. The flavor frames as well what the weakness of the shadow muscle will be I'm looking definitely. The answer would be even though I'm looking definitely eventually might finding out that answer through will is the scenario that I'm bringing into this. And Mike feeling in that scenario that I'm doing. Yes, I'm doing even at that point, they would have to the answer would be with run up, it's definitely a they would have to go up to the password and find out the hideout, the base of run up where exactly it is. And basically would have the enemy run up. It's definitely memorable because I'm definitely the scenario that I'm doing for while with different the scenario right now is definitely for with my basically talking the strategy of getting built to the place where the shadow master won't be knowing where it's I'm looking so they would be right now taking build outside of Hawkins the town for at that point of play the shadow master will be losing in a race of control over the scenario that happened. So I'm looking once they will be exiting the town of Hawkins which will I'm looking at that point will maybe running back to normal the scenario that happened. And at that point I'm Mike asking Bill exact same question as for asking Bill as what the weakness of shadow monster is. And I'm looking at that point the only thing that we could come up with I'm Japanese would be I'm looking at that point what Bill would be saying would be just material. I'm looking definitely there will be this specific glowing light white light kind of a material within the barrel, present within the barrel board, and these materials will be the weakness of will be the weakness of the shadow monster, and the shadow monster will be totally afraid of these materials and will be always keeping a distance from material or these materials will be within the barrel board. So these materials and something will be only found within the barrel board below. Definitely on thread. So that will be something unique about the barrel board. Also, my temperature is definitely for glowing light white light kind of a material example to would be the weakness of the shadow monster. Another thing would be the exact light white light would be what might have been present in those lampposts in those great number of lampposts which which was surrounded by darkness which will have basically seen from the real world during the Halloween day will even see the bad from the real world and during Halloween day will see while seeing the bad will having seen with great number of and lampposts aligned and spread across where those lampposts alone had a light in it this white colored light in it while in the bad world that those lampposts were surrounded by darkness everywhere and the reason for those light alone and shining right would be definitely due to it being not actually light that might be presented in it, but it might be this glowing kind of material, white light producing kind of white color light producing kind of a material that might have been present within the within those lampposts within the temperature. So which runner might have only figured how way back to stepping into the temperature. So that way it might have been and those lampposts and physical memorization would be definitely leading to the base of burnout other than the parallel what is stepping in the frames. So definitely would be still arrive and would be busy with experiments there in like the bad in his face in like the bad words. Minimum like this material, like building weapons with this material would give the current best chance to be able to like do anything for any sort of damage against like the shadow monster that we might of the rate temperature. Okay, so like the minimum preemption right now as for like Nancy right now basically having that absolute skill while in like the percent of steel for like cheating on steel with like Johnson that may have been that my mother episode right now of like how eventually schools would be finding out, shockingly finding out about like Nancy having cheated on Steve with like Jonathan and like unpredictably it could be eventually in like the scenario where like I'm looking at one like 11 and Callie and also will be like eventually showing up and basically want like the entire army will be set and the player in that army like luckily Steve, Nancy and Jonathan will be part of that army and I'm them totally heading over to like the bad world to like find like the layer of like the shadow monster and like destroy it. And it would be during that force chaos that will be happening at that point. We able to like tragedy total failing and like the shadow monster still surviving their whole ambush attack of like maybe destroying like the layer of like the shadow monster while like shadow monster will be resting in it with that absolute cut and then ambush that's great from the trainers. Still the shadow monster taking a lot of the still bring the shadow monster being tough. So it's in the toughness from that like it still would be coming out of like that layer and like the shadow monster chasing after like all of them with like the scenarios that everything. So like at that point I was like the scenario to be like Jonathan along with like everyone that they are trying to like run and escape like like Nancy and Jonathan and Steve as well would be like running together trying for their life. And I'm maybe to be at that point that I'm like Nancy was only feeling that this might be it like they really like with them being at that point upon remembering from them like being getting saved by this like huge giant spider like shadow monster like like I think we're only feeling that like maybe this might be it for them that like they might soon be getting eliminated by like the shadow monster and along the line Nancy will be killing so like I'm doing that feeling for something and like Nancy finally getting that courage to totally like tell the truth to like Steve of, about her cheating on Steve with like Jonathan with like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like this is like the scenario that I'm looking at like Jonathan and Nancy and Steve will be running from their life away from like the shadow monster like the shadow months of giant shadow months of you facing them like at this point during that time like in Nancy was basically really the that group to like Steve and everyone still even while Steve would be running for his life like I'm still getting extremely angry with like Nancy. But like I'm due to that whole situation like I'm still like working out and basically still totally prioritizing solely due to that situation like I'm still not being so much extremely worried about that realization, but like even more than that, still would be still focused on like basically trying to like ensure that he survives from like the shadow monster and everything. He and them all of them like survive from the shadow monster and everything. So like I'm thinking that being eventually being during such an extreme intense and chaotic kind of like a situation that like Nancy will be really the proof about cheating on Steve was like John to like Steve like killing scenario that and also trying and okay, so like looking information right now as for like Dustin right now, we are sleeping that like Lucas and Maxine in love. Like I'm so bring like the actuality of the situation would be like Maxine in like the person would be nice of having any sort of like affectionate kind of like feelings towards like the night of Dustin not Lucas was definitely mentored. Maxine will like totally seeing both Dustin as well as like Lucas in like the person that's like good friend is definitely mentored. And in the case of Lucas, like even while Lucas right now tells Dustin that like these Martin's not just that but still deep down that Lucas would be having a massive crush and affectionate feeling towards like Maxine. Definitely one three understand. Just like Lucas would be right now in like with only hiding from Dustin's definitely one three understand. So in actuality, I'm going to right now in like the person definitely Maxine. In the case of Maxine definitely will be having a massive crush on Steve. In secret. The minimal parameter is like Maxine will be keeping it that absolute secret. In actuality, like I'm definitely like Maxine will definitely have that massive pressure right now towards like Steve and Steve alone is definitely my friend. Okay, so like the minimum friend. So right now, as for like my strategy to like find out if the weakness of the Salomon. So will I'm the friend definitely go right now. I'm the friend not going to extremely smoothly and such an easy and quick manner for that step minimum version. It's we just that they not easily working out So it would be in such a manner like a scenario that I'm going to do it. But right now, because then like the scenario to be like definitely even while like winter, like even while winter sleep, like I'm looking still like the shadow monster control would definitely be still very much present on very definitely when the direction. So like I'm looking get like the situation for like the shadow monster is only that like the shadow monster would be only able to uh, to move will or make will say like a message or what it wants to say and all that like only while will would be awake uh physically awake it's definitely my brain but so like it will be only that alone that like the shadow monster won't be would be having that limitation on right now while like the shadow monster still would be on that absolute perfect control having that absolute perfect control on will even while Jill is right now sleeping it's definitely my brain so like I'm so like definitely with Steve Jobs totally putting up all this dark clothes into this shed like place like I'm just definitely in a complete dark place like to totally to put Will in like a complete dark place and for Mike and all of them to be present there and they believe then when Will wakes up for them to like try to like ask Will all of their questions will be like the plan of Mike is definitely no intervention. So like I'm just like definitely my strategy obviously is the backfiring like scenario that I'm doing because like I'm doing definitely uh, like even though Mike and also would be thinking that once like Will would be waking up and they will be asking questions at that point for it to be a scenario where like the shadow monster will be desperately trying to like reach out and control Will but like due to like the dark surrounding uh, like uh, uh, due to like Will being surrounded by its black darkness due to like the dark cloth and everything like the shadow monster not being able to like locate and hence not being able to control wind would be along the lines of the boomerang definitely Mike would be totally this would be like the strategy of like Mike right now. With like Mike's dialogue that like he won't be like if he doesn't know like the monster doesn't know where Kel is and all that definitely but like his strategy would be paying half as like the scenario that I'm doing. So, like the moment because like the scenario that I'm doing is for Mike and all of them like basically within that shed while they were just surrounded by all those like dark clothes like and in that absolute full darkness like I'm just they were just surrounding a sleeping Will and I'm like was basically waiting for Will to like wake up. So like eventually Will waking up it's like the scenario that I'm doing. But like the twist at that point happening is like the scenario that I'm doing. Because like the moment Will be waking up will be like waking up in actuality in the dark void. It's definitely memorable. Where like only 11 as well as like the faces monster alone have so far been revealed to like have access to. It's definitely memorable. So definitely like the faces monster definitely will be having access to will be totally having access to like the dark void exactly like 11. It's definitely memorable. And this will be the precise and exact reason for like basically in like the past when Will was part in like the battle world when like typically the moment will Eleven had like entered the dark void and tried to like find Will and saw Will in like the dark void Will who was safely hide managing to like hide from like the faces monster and was like hidden in like castle bias in like the battlefield that very same Will like as soon as like Eleven had basically searched and found Will in like the through the dark void the way soon after that itself, like the fact that like the famous monster had like instantly found Will and captured and taken away Will and even put Will into scrap like situation with like that thing on Will's mouth. Like all this would be definitely what's happening would be definitely due to like the faceless monsters would be like probably would be able to like see what see and have access to like the dark void. Not only have access to the dark void, but like whenever anyone enters into like the dark void and access the dark void, like instantly, like the faces won't be able to sense this. Definitely my big impression, and it would be like the faces want to alone, like I'm living like the shadow monster as well. I'm just like maybe being able to like send would be having the same power to like access the dark void. It's like one possibility that I'm putting, or like the other possibility that I'm putting is for like the shadow monster might not have such power, but since like the shadow monster in like the prevent is like controlling all this space that monsters I think would be a continuous reason even while Will is sleeping, like the shadow monster might be having control on Will as well, and would definitely due to this reason, since like it was like the faceless monster that had captured Will and was like the spreading. within build and everything. Like solely due to that reason, like through like the element of like the connection of like the faces monsters alone, like the shadow monster getting access right now to like the dark world of like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like that's like scenario that I'm looking. That way that will like the moment will be waking up will be in that absolute darkness and we would be hearing like the voices of Mike and the around it, but like when so like I'm feeling like at that point like Mike would be asking Bill all these questions and would actually for like Mike to not straight away at that point that the moment Bill would be waking up itself like Mike to like not straight away ask Bill about like the weakness of like the shadow monster or anything like Mike initially asking a bunch of questions to like Bill to like random questions to like Bill to like find out as like my and my as well as yours as well. My uncle been like possibly asking a bunch of questions to like will and that will be there that would be like the strategy to like to confirm that Will is like during that moment like during that time like Will is not still not being controlled by like the shadow monster. So that confirm that like uncle like or like the fact that like the shadow monster like knows the possibility of like like the shadow monster knows where exactly Will is right now or not like so like I'm just working with my hand towards like I think about the questions to like Will to see if like Will is like still under like the control of like the even while surrounded by all those like dark clothes like if like basically that after darkness even still if that will is under still under the control of like the shadow monster like but then like my and there was nothing about the question then like them at that point like also feeling as if like basically will is like totally definitely at this point is definitely not under like the control of like the shadow monster and like Mike's strategy had what would be along the lines like Mike as well as George as well all of them would be probably at that point thinking definitely friendly so and at that point, it would be like genuinely, even though like the shadow monster would be having the control over will, like the shadow monster will be only like keeping that control in a suppressed kind of state during that point, just patiently waiting. Like because like the shadow monster will be extremely brilliant. So Stephanie Wilson, so like basically kind of Stephanie Wilson, so like the shadow monster will be patiently like keeping that control over will in like a suppressed kind of state to like let out like the real will and for like to have like the real will interact with like Mike and others to like for like the shadow monster to like figure out what like Mike and others are like totally planning next. So like that way it would be like to the real will that I'm looking to like Mike and also be at that point speaking and or that like the scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point I was like the shopping just happening with like Will suddenly seeing 11 there. Uh, like just scenario that but 11 won't be actually there. But it will be just 11 in appearing in that dark void of like the scenario that because like I was looking like it is like the soon enough case with like the game of like 11 as well because like I was actually whenever anyone enters into and access next the dark void like I'm just like at that point 11 as well will be instantly able to like spend that even though 11 even if like 11 is like outside the dark void like still 11 will be able to like instantly sense that basically whenever someone will be entering into like the dark void. It's also like new friends. So like in the black 11 at that point sensing that and feeling that someone is in like the dark void. So like 11 straight away putting on like the uh blinds and blindfold and basically 11 as well entering into like the dark void once like will be after will be entering into like the dark void is like the scenario that up. So that Will won't be even realizing that Will during that time at the like the dark void will be Will situation, but 11 would be constantly entering like the dark void to like find out who it was that basically had entered into the dark void, and that way like 11 being totally shocked at seeing Will, and Will being totally shocked at seeing 11 is like the scenario that so like from the dark void like I think like 11 totally running towards like Will and like basically holding Will from the shoulders and basically asking Will as to like where it's like Mike and the others will be along the lines like maybe 11 asking Will is like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like I'm going to bring like and maybe so like maybe like scenario being like at that point like 11 in the dark way like 11 not seeing like my camera will be like that will be like sitting around with in that dark room it's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm going like while 11 would be asking this question to like Will and like will be totally shocked as well to like see 11 after like an entire whole years of like thing that 11 had basically like a year back like basically so Will as well can be totally shocked at seeing 11 so like everyone would be totally getting emotional with like joy on seeing Will, and the Eleven will be even confused and will be asking Will like how Will made it to like the made it to like the uh, dark world or something, or like it would be like a scenario where like maybe like even just asking Will has to like where Mike is. So like I'm looking before even Will would be even saying the reply to that, like I'm looking like Mike even would be probably hearing Mike's voice. And I'm looking like even though we don't want to be seeing Mike, like Elon will be hearing Mike's voice at that point, like, scenario that I'm looking. And Mike asking Will at that point as for like um asking Bill that is without realizing that like Bill is in like the dark world and like basically that like all that darkness has caused like Bill to like we sent to do like the dark world and due to like Bill having that connection of like the shadow monster and like the basic monster and everything. So like without realizing this like and without realizing that like 11 at that point will be in like the dark world fighting from Bill like like Mike at that point asking Will has to like what is it that the weakness of like the shadow monster is will be some lines that might be at that point like asking with so like at that point I was like a sudden change to like happen at that point another was happening with with like man of the man the voice and all that changing with like instantly like it being revealed to like my camera was that basically where like they might have all thought that basically might have done this up and then like the shadow monster had so at that time had absolutely no control of skill like at that point then shockingly realizing that basically that the shadow monster still had control over it. So like at that point like that question itself like I'm doing that question of my asking Will as to like what the weakness of like to tell them what the weakness of the shadow monster is. At that point itself like I'm doing like shadow monster will be getting extremely enraged and like will be straight away uh, will be letting out like that full control over Will. And then the point like an angry Will like things like for and at that point like even will see like standing right in front of Will in like the dark void. So like I'm just like even at Will getting seriously scared but like an extremely with like facial expression itself like changing a lot and with like an extremely relevant I mean like Will in an extremely enraged manner shouting out some an extreme last warning kind of like not a last warning but like that absolute threat of like a message meant for like Mike and all of them and it's like the scenario that I'm just select with at that point that they would be sharing like the same fate as that of like their friend would be along the lines like I'm something like Will at that point will be shouting like that their friend probably along the lines like I'm something like 11 at that point. I mean like Will at that point would be like an extremely enraged man of shouting and maybe laughing at that point in a realistic manner like scenario that I'm thinking. And that sorely scaring not only 11 but like Mike and all of them at that point is like the scenario that I'm thinking. That way like I'm something that feels that this is like the scenario that I'm leaning more towards like since being not that easy for like Mike and others where like they were them like simply asking like what the weakness of the monster is and then straight away telling them like what the weakness of the monster is. It's not the eventual scenario that I'm looking for right. So like this strategy of Mike to get that weakness of like of like of like the shadow monster out of will that totally backfiring and failing right now. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. And also my Pankurian predictions for like maybe from that point on like let the shadow monster like fully controlling Will and it needs like the entire time that all that at all times being like in full control like the shadow monster and basically always having that aggressive tone and basically like Mike and all of them like basically losing their actual whole will like totally for maybe like from that point on it's like a possibility that I'm right. So like that would be that also like a possibility that from that point on like with consistently remaining in like that absolute full control of like the shadow of at all times it's like a good scenario until like in the Mike and others like eventually finally defeats and eliminates like the shadow monster in like the battle but eventually until that point from this point on like will remaining in like that absolute full control of the shadow monster is like the scenario that I'm doing on him. Okay, so like the minimum prevention right now, but like even Mike as well right now the approach to like Maxine and telling Maxine that like she's not part of like the group like I'm still my cultural impressions definitely for like eventually once like that reunion will be happening between like Mike and everyone that would be really happening like which definitely happening without much great delay or like the scenario that I'm looking for it. So like once that happens, like I'm looking definitely Mike will be like lightening up a lot. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. That whole Mike that like Mike always had like I'm returning back to like my like scenario that I'm doing. And at that point, I'm considering like my straight away accepting like Mike at that point would be having like absolutely zero reluctancy at that point in accepting Maxi into like the absolute to the like scenario. One like 11 will be done by like the scenario that I'm looking at. 11 the return will be giving all of them that have to hope and will be like totally like changing like the entire vibe of like the content the group entire group of like Mike and all of them and or all of them would be straight away accepting fully wholeheartedly accepting 11 I mean like matching into like the party and will be like as like exactly like one among the exactly like 11 or like anybody in each and every single one of them like them seeing like Macwin from that point exactly like as like one of the it's like the Hindu scenario that I'm going so like but the benefit will be only through 11 like return like the moment 11 will be making a return back to like the project game that like I'm just like finally like everyone like Mike and others will be finally except for Lucas like Mike and Justin will be finally especially Mike would be like being nice with like with like my thing is like the scenario that I'm supposed to say. Okay, so like the new transition right now as of like George just mentioned right now about like Will's own rainbow spaceships that like Will had thrown in the like I'm thinking definitely that I'm considering like eventually in that distant future, not only like the temperature, but like I'm thinking that being that was be having a lot of that probably being a subscribing first of all mother three episodes to like the final showdown scenario where like I'm definitely that rainbow spaceship that I never before seen kind of like a spaceship like actually in real life like showing up during like that final war against like all this like great number of armies, shadow monsters and all sorts of monsters. Like I'm getting like why this entire this war room taking place like I'm getting like those spaceships showing up with like the scenario that I'm looking for like I'm considering like definitely there will be all this like extremely highly advanced futuristic technology technological kind of like spaceship uh, which like I'm looking like definitely to like the world of like the stranger things that let's say for example like the there will be like that like humans would have built and basically definitely to be like talking undisclosed to like the rest of like the world or to like the rest of the human in like the world they would be like actually not so aware of the living and that would be solely meant for like extreme emergency situations alone the minimum like I'm just like eventually by the time it will be like towards the very end of like the show, like I'm doing like in that final war, like I'm doing by then like I'm doing like the news will be like okay leaking out of like the town of Hawkins, like I'm doing the news eventually at some point I'm doing the play towards like the end, like I'm doing like news finally getting leaked out from like just the town of Hawkins to like the entirety of like the world finding out about like the situation going on in like the town of Hawkins, like with like the PAL word and like the gate and everything that has like the potential to like basically to bring about like the end of like the entirety of like the world like basically like and everything like the official across like the world like eventually going towards like the very end like will be finding out about the like the scenario that happened and then like I'm going to be at that point that I'm like them probably they will be having all this like officials will be having like across like the world will be having like secret underway like this high tech futuristic technology uh, like highly advanced spaceship created spacecraft spaceship kind of like spacecraft created with like highly advanced like futuristic technology from hundreds of years ahead into like the future of human train which those spaceship samples would be definitely ending up being playing that major role, final role in like that war against like the army of like the giant shadow monster and like everything was like scenario that I'm in. So like that at that point I'm looking definitely will totally remembering seeing this like spaceship and I'm looking like these highly advanced spaceship I'm looking definitely would be like human built spaceship is what I'm looking for. Like I'm celebrating totally the spaceship itself but not built by aliens but like built by humans. It's like the scenario that I'm looking so like that would be like for it would be like the public would be seeing such spaceships for like the first time. It's like the scenario that I'm preparing, and that would be like so highly advanced and basically that would be a reminding will of those uh Will's own drawing of his own spaceship, like this is a rainbow colored spaceship that he had drawn, like and those actual spaceship when definitely I'm looking even at that one will be definitely alive. And like when you will be seeing all this like fancy colored like spaceship that basically approaching from like the sky, like I'm looking approaching in like the sky, like I'm looking like definitely at that point will usually reminded of these words of like joy is definitely builds not of joy, is definitely not of rendition. Because like I'm saying like at that point I'm assuming the definitely scenario would be like by then like Joyce would have totally would be like given right before that, soon before that I'm assuming like ending up in some sort of like an extremely dangerous situation where like I'm looking like one of like the monsters will be about to take this life. So like at that point I'm looking definitely choice like really sacrificing her life to like protect Bill. Like the scenario that I'm looking. And that way like I'm looking for Bill at that point would be like witnessing Joyce as like the scenario that I'm doing. That like towards like the very end that I'm looking, that's a scenario. And that way that Joyce protecting Bill, but like Joyce that way ending up dying by the monsters like the scenario that happened. So like at that point I was like the battle would be like the battle in like the side of like the team of like the all the previous experiments of like runner like from 11 and Cali to like all the remaining experiments paid experience of runner who would all be at that point have would have trained and advanced like their superpowers to like way greater levels as well as like the entire army of like runner and team as well as like Hopper and all of them would be like fighting in that final war against like this giant army of like scaramouches. Like I'm doing then at that point will be on the losing side of like that war. But like I'm doing that. So like even after like Vince like mother death like George's death, like Bill will be totally feel at that point would be feeling hopeless and just like basically even after all just like the end result would be as like everything that all their efforts and everything is about the fail would be along the lines that will and all of them will be totally feeling. And at that point is when I'm looking like them getting that unexpected twist happening with like the end of topic, this highly advanced like spaceship, which would be at that point that I'm looking at they will be remembering these exact words that like Will's mother so passionately and emotionally is like right now telling Will about like his own drawing of his like his own rainbow colored spaceship it's definitely my better ambition. So that this is like the scenario that I'm and that like the final twist that I'm also putting that will be like changing like the tide of like the battle against like the shadow monsters and basically resulting in like the humans finally offering and defeating like the shadow monsters and all the other monsters that would be at that point would be like attack would be like launching the attack and then within that war during then like the whole fight will be totally happening on the spring like in like the real world with like all these great number of monsters from like the parallel world giant monsters from like, the parallel world or like totally by then like the within like the energy level plate like expanding to the point of like it being so huge that basically all these monsters like invade and infiltrating into like the real world through that gate at that point like the scenario that I'm just so like it would be in that real world that I'm looking at that point like the whole war was taking place and that war like that final twist happening with all these like highly advanced spaceships and basically those highly advanced spaceships will be about like will be finally changing the tide of the battle and basically bringing down all this like great number of monsters and basically saving humanity that with like that coupled with like all that words that like Will as well as Mike and all of them will be like putting that will be what finally will be saving humanity in like the final sort of this is like the final sort of scenario that I'm looking at. Okay, so like listening in tension right now, this is like Joyce, Jonathan, as well as Mike right now telling that emotional backstory comes from the like William, but still ambivalent like their attempts still ambivalent that scenario that like their attempts still ending up becoming a failure. It's like the scenario that I'm saying. So like ambivalent like, the situation would be like while they will be saying their emotional backstory which has like it don't comes in important to like will like ambivalent like at that point ambivalent like will would be actually like will won't be taking like facial expression of like feeling emotional Stephanie Wembley. That would definitely be like the option will but like the more like thousand would be like coming out like something like definitely the shadow monster will be finally like once again like intensifying the shadow monster's control over Bill at that point like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm right now with like Bill trophy looking at like Jonathan White as well as like Joyce in an extremely emotional manner, like I'm doing earlier right now itself, like I'm just like them all getting that huge shock with like will once again like shouting at them in an aggressive manner right now once again by instantly once again getting controlled by the shadow monster like those scenarios that I'm and considering for like it could like just not be shouting at them but like or like will just telling that to like release will but like I'm looking like it I'm looking like will while being controlled by like shadow monster at that point will be giving like telling them that absolute threat that basically each and every single one of them are going to like get eliminated exactly like the friend Bob will be along the lines of like the shadow monster at that point, like will really while controlling will be like making them tell the like the scenario that I'm preparing and that's like the scenario that I'm preparing. Okay, so like so right now that's for like why like the kind of will say it's like saying that me go like will tapping like just like two fingers multiple times like that will definitely not for signal or interesting. So like I'm doing this is like recently so had basically like use MorseCode not recently but like a year back like operate had used like with very kind of like MorseCode to like basically to communicate with like 11 numbers. This would definitely would be what like Hopper right now through that can noticing that tapping of like two fingers of will might have right now to the especially in the trend. So like the different definitely right now for like the scenario that I'm looking is for like even though right now I'm looking like it to be like the actual will I do this stealthily trying to communicate through like the most code through the tapping of the two fingers. Like right now, I'm preferring like it to be the actual will and not like the another strategy by or like a trap set by like the shadow monster. Like once again, break copper and all won't be the case right now. You know, right now, I'm preferring it to be like the actual will steadily sending out like the monster to help copper and others. It's like the scenario that I was about. So like I'm preferring like regardless of like the message to the current milestone that like Hopper will be finding out. Definitely I'm looking Hopper getting a major flow uh, by translating that milestone. It's like the scenario that I was looking. But like I'm looking like still like I'm looking like I'm looking Hopper and team still getting tricked by the shadow monster like the scenario that I'm looking and that I'm looking happening through like I'm looking like Hopper to be totally getting extremely more confident and excited with like the when being able to communicate the actual when being able to communicate to them through like the Moscow that like like Hopper would be repeatedly again trying to like get more information out of Will through like this very same Moscow is like the scenario that I'm like multiple times like repeatedly again and again. Eventually like future like the scenario that I'm looking at. So in like the communicative scenario that I'm looking at, that is where I'm looking for like Hopper and team would be like messing up like the scenario that I'm looking because like at that point I'm like eventually like the shadow monster will be figuring out eventually like the more will would be like using like the very same two finger tapping technique to like send like the most code to like Hopper and all of them like I'm like eventually like definitely and like the shadow monster will be only with its intelligence like the shadow monster will be able to like easily figure out eventually what's going on that basically that like the actual will like totally secretly giving out once again trying to like betray uh, like the shadow monster and just secretly giving out flows and everything to like Copper and also maybe one thing that the shadow monster would be probably eventually figuring out is like the scenario that I'm doing. So as it is like it has already been revealed that we believe the shadow monster can see what we can see and like see what we can see. So like specifically because of because of this rhythm that we're putting like every time Will would be tapping with his like two fingers like and sending like the monster to like Copper. The different like the shadow monster as well will be feeling that tapping of the two fingers. So like initially I'm looking like the shadow monster who might have absolutely no idea at all about like the monster will be like not finding anything suspicious about like the tapping of like the two fingers of Will. Initially like the scenario that I'm looking, but like I'm looking that before like scenario to be like eventually I'm looking like of trying to get more and more information and flows out of that will. And that way we'll using more and more code. And that at that point, like I'm thinking, like the suspicion will be growing, starting to like, grow the thing like the shadow monster. And I'm looking like the shadow monster easily being able to like figure out that it's like most code and the shadow monster recording what will it's like doing. And basically that way like I'm looking the shadow monster uses its intelligence like totally uh like forcefully controlling like those two fingers of like the scenario that I'm doing and the shadow monster like sending its own like false most like the finance to hop up and other than totally tricking them and like only eventually that process eventually spiraling into like hopper and like the team eventually ending up with like them feeling that they have found like the ultimate solution to like bring down like the shadow monster. But like I'm looking at that like I'm looking like they would all be heading to like the bad world. But like I'm doing that with them ending up right falling right into like the trap of like the shadow monster. Once again, it was like changing scenario that I'm like and not frame. Okay, so like new friends are right now, so like the shadow monster right now finding out that Wilson left this home and basically with like the sound of like the kids want us approaching from a distance like a film brains are right now is definitely for like even though like Hopper and all of them are trying to like leave with home. I'm also trying to send to be like right as soon as like they will be getting in their car and I'm like they will be like trying to like leave and escape with their car from like this home like right as they will be like starting their car itself like I'm thinking like the situation that is happening with like all those like uh great an entire great army of like this monsters surrounding them at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like at that point, I'm looking like the car, like there will be two cars, like so like everyone like Bob and like uh, Jonathan, Nancy, and all of them like Joyce and Will, and all of them like being all of them within like these two cars, and these two cars like thoroughly being surrounded by an entire huge army of like monsters, like those scenarios that I'm in. So like at that point, I'm like putting like everyone except that Copper for me. Saying that basically it's like over for them, like the scenario that like it's like no way out, like Copper kill, and the that leads due to that like uh sure mindset of like Copper would be still would be only focused on figuring out a way to like escape, but like while all the others will be like I'm looking like they think that like this is it, like basically it's like over for them. So like I'm looking like at that point, I'm also putting like that was happening with like 11 totally showing up at that point is like scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point, I'm definitely like 11 showing up, and like at that point, I'm also like, and at that point, I'm definitely prepping for like everyone to be like the entire gang to be like totally like all of them being like totally and absolutely shocked, all of them including Hopper being like totally shocked to like see 11 at that point. Showing up the like the scenario that I'm looking, and definitely might will be like that person that really like the shock will be shocked the most and basically at that point I was like 11 showing up and straight away sending out like 11 like super powers and basically straight away attacking all those like faceless monsters and still something like it would definitely be like the four-legged like faceless monsters and not like the not even a single humanoid faceless monster would be the new and definitely I'm surprised like the humanoid faceless monster would be a whole lot stronger than like the for like a case is not the minimum rate, but like straight away using 11 like to the thousand and attacking like those Facebook models like scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point, since I'm looking that is when like I'm going to be giving them like all of them get to be getting all of them giving all of them that absolute morale boost where like until 11 showing up like they might have been all saying that basically that this was it for them, but like I'm with like 11 showing up like all of them getting that sudden excitement and courage and basically that absolute moral and wisdom. But that like I'm saying like all of them like Steve picking up this like base for that definitely I'm looking like he would have noted that into like the top so like quickly picking that up and basically all of them like fighting off with like whatever like weapons they would have loaded up onto like the stars like and them fighting against like those places monsters like the scenario that and 11 as well fighting along with it and using 11 to the also like the scenario that I'm looking for. Yeah, like I'm looking like the scenario to be like to be like past to many great number of like favorite monsters at that point that I'm looking for like even with like 11 using 11 specific purpose as well like I'm looking like them still having a hard time and I'm looking like definitely offer getting like seriously injured as well in that whole fight and attack is like the scenario that I'm looking but like 11 would be totally like even 11 giving 11 like absolute best at like using 11 like super powers with that intensity to like ensure that basically none of like the basic monsters they able to like to get that none of that again like neither might look interesting or even might look like scenario or even will look like good scenario. But while Unbelievable will would be in like safely in like the car and only asleep while all the others will be like outside of like the car and trying to like fight out like this like scenario that I'm so glad. Yeah, like I'm putting like their team effort like still not being enough to like take out like the entire like, the mountain like the scenario that I'm recording. Maybe like I'm looking to like maybe through 11 help like maybe them collectively managing to like take out like the entirety of like the army of like the states of monsters at that point that will be showing up to attack without them not losing anyone or like having anyone so extremely or severely injured to like the point of like they will be struggling to survive. That's like the scenario that I'm putting. That's like one possible scenario that I'm putting. The second possible scenario that I'm putting was for like even with like 11 showing up, for example, prediction at that point 11 showing up and basically with like 11 losing 11 like super power and all of them like fighting back against the faces monster. Even then like the number of cases monsters being far too great that like them still getting into trouble. So like at that point, like the extreme unexpected hindrance of like Danny as well as like Danny gang of like showing up. At that point is like other public scenario, to step like a scenario that and all of them like Mike and all of them will be like totally confused as to like who these people are. But like I'm looking at that point, like everyone would get only excited to like see Cali again. So like I'm looking like definitely since that if that happens, then I'm looking like that will make or to multiple ambition that like up like even flipping up from like Cali, definitely Cali might have been the sooner stuff that so Cali might have maybe been a quick learner. So like Cali might have physically put in back all that hard work into like trying to access like the dark word and Cali might have had case of fear in that and like Cali might have quickly found like where 11 was and might have quickly Cali and like the Robert gang with the band like and might have we head on after like 11 towards like Hawkins and that way like I'm doing all of them like without much delay like I'm people like while 11 and all of them will be like only struggling against like the basic monster and basically starting to like it would be like looking kind of like hopeless for them even at that point like at that point I was like Cali as well as like the Robert gang like basically showing up and basically collectively with their efforts like and like all of them like thoroughly like like thoroughly eliminating a bunch of like the faceless monsters and I'm looking like maybe that at that point like very few faceless monsters are remaining and that those faceless monsters are looking like even by in like being in like the control of the environment of like them maybe being them slowly still creating is like the scenario that about like so like the majority of like the faceless monsters like getting eliminated and taken out or like in the entire of the faceless monsters getting eliminated it's like one of these two scenarios that I'm like and then Compositor like an entire whole gang meeting in like Will's home itself. Like I'm considering definitely for like them not going anywhere and I'm considering at that point like they would be totally feeling absolutely so that they are forced absolute defeat against like all this great army of like monsters of like this army of like the shadow monsters again. So then that's giving them such an extreme boost of confidence to like the entire gang, like the scenario that I'm doing. So that like I'm seeing them deciding not to even leave the time, try to like for the time being, not even trying to like leave Will's home or like even the town of Hawking, but like then straight away returning back and asking back to like Will's home to have like uh, a huge meeting with like all of them like entering Will's home and basically all of them starting like get to know each other like as to like basically like my slowly starting like a dog shop of like 11 meeting 11 and basically the reunion of like Mike and 11 and basically like as the gang like Mike because end up like also getting angry at like for like hiding 11 for like a whole year from them and basically all the time basically 11 at that point like introducing Cali to like Mike and the gang and like during their interaction like I'm looking uh, like eventually I'm looking maybe during their interaction will be at some point like I'm looking like maybe like do the sample like introducing like Maxine to Candy as like this is like Mad Max and all this like and I'm looking at that point like maybe Candy telling the that basically no she's like Mad Max because like I'm sticking to my explanation that like in that arcade game that top score of Mad Max will definitely be Candy's definitely my favorite. So Candy might have even like the past might have often showed up steadily to like the town of Hawkins all by herself maybe and might have showed up to like the arcade game area and might have like, played arcade games of once a while. Gary might definitely show up to like the round of Hawkins remember it and might have been more like carry the spread attempt for that the spread to like looking for lost system from like the rainbow room in like the runners like labs the minimum remember so like even those skills Gary might not have like the courage to like go all the way up to like and set at like for another laboratory. So like I'm looking like Cali will be this even while having that fear with her like Cali will be like still showing up to like that might have showed up to like the town of Hawkins like once a while in the past like multiple times and basically might have mostly showed up to like the arcade and played the games and might have straight away became like the top star and Mad Max and might have left and looked around and then the town of Hawkins and Flash. Disappointedly might have left back to her city and left Hawkins and back to her city each and every single time. Might have been what might have happened in the past 15 minutes, 3 minutes. So definitely that way like Lucas and Dustin and the last like Mike probably talkingly finding out that like Mad Max in that time wasn't Maxine but like was Jerry. Like also like giving the scenario that I'm and not game. And the film was super like at that point for like Steve and like the robber gang of Cali like not at all getting along. Like the during like the initial stage like sort of in scenario that happened like Steve and like the robber gang would be like and like they would be like not getting along but like they would be always like sticking fight between each other like all the time. It's also like an injustice of the scenario that I'm saying. Yeah, like I'm sort of like eventually like them forming a bond eventually as they would be going through like the dangers of like the parallel world and everything together. It's like an injustice scenario that I'm sitting on. Okay, so like the mission right now as for like Hopper and the gang, like right now, like while in like Will's home, like basically with weapons and waiting for like the monsters to infiltrate, but like the monsters making sounds and not infiltrating. But so they definitely do to like 11 mission. So like the league outside the home of like Bill, where like Hopper and all of them are like absolutely tense and switched out and expecting like the monsters to like basically infiltrate at any moment. Like I'm doing definitely the scenario to be like outside, like I'm doing like 11 miles so he made it to Will's home and basically straight away 11 because like 11 might have once again you like that entered the dark world and might have found Mike at like Will's home in like the person just definitely train. So like 11 so it like might have been totally on her way to like Will's home and might have made it towards like the front area of like Will's home and at that point that 11 might have seen was like a great number of like faceless monsters like basically and so they rushing towards like Wilson to like attack Mike. So definitely when with so like definitely outside like what is sounds of like and screeching of like the monster going on outside and with like the monster still not infiltrating into like Will's home to attack where Hopper and all of them are like stressed out and standing and waiting for like the monsters. Like I'm doing definitely like right now the scenario would be like instead of like the monsters right now on the different like the door will be opening to like 11 stepping in. It's like the scenario that I'm about to bring. So like at that point, I'm going to bring like maybe like Nancy, like I'm going to bring like accidentally like using her weapon without accidentally like Nancy not being able to control herself and basically accidentally Nancy using her weapon thinking that like it was like the monster like basically. So like I'm doing the moment like 11 will be opening the door like I'm like Nancy accidentally using her weapon. And at that point like 11 with like a smile, like basically using her superpowers and stopping like the weapon, just like scenario that end of the door. Right? So like and like while they would all be seeing like in like the background where like Eleven would be smiling at them like and like all those like faceless monsters like basically thoroughly like eliminated. It's like the scenario that end of the door. So like I'm talking that way like the finally the reunion between like Eleven and Mike happening through such an extreme intense manner like in the scenario that I'm delivering right now and not